Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Roy, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar today. We're going to give everybody a couple more minutes to get here and get set up, so just sit tight, and the presentation will begin shortly. Okay, for people who are just joining, we're just going to give everybody another minute or so to get settled, and then we're going to get started with the presentation. So just hang on tight, be ready to take notes and mark dates on your calendar, and we're going to dive in very, very soon. Okay, we are going to get started, everybody. I hope we're all here and ready. Like I said, my name is Jessica Roy. I'm the personal finance columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, and I'm going to be presenting this webinar today with information about paying for college in California. Got our opening slide here. So a lot of this information is coming from the San Francisco Chronicle's definitive guide to California college admissions. During this, we're going to be sharing some links to some of these stories in the chat. I was hoping I would be able to see the chat while in presenter mode, and it looks like I'm not, but we have some of our audience people on this webinar with us who will hopefully be able to share that. And then a little bit on who I am. Like I said, Jessica Roy, personal finance columnist. I write about a lot of different topics, including things like UC admissions and getting off the wait list. I've written about community college rankings, a lot of topics around personal finance. You might have seen me. I've been on CNN. I've been on ABC News. And earlier this year, I was on Everybody's Live with John Mulaney on Netflix. So that was exciting. We're going to be answering questions from attendees, some that came before the webinar that I'll be answering throughout this presentation. I'm going to try and pop out and look in on the Q&A from time to time to see if there are quick questions that I can answer. If not, we're going to have a formal Q&A at the end where we're going to be able to see all that stuff. Someone says they can't see the PowerPoint in full. Jeff and Anna, I see you on there. Are you guys able to see the PowerPoint? Are you looking at it right now?
Yes.
Okay, well, I'm going to keep sharing it here. And if we keep having issues, now I can see the chat. Until we continue to have technical difficulties, just let me know and we can take another look at this. So the first question that we got for the webinar is, what is the true cost of paying for college in California? I hope everybody took a deep breath before I got to this slide. This is from our reporting based on the total sticker price, no aid whatsoever costs for attending some of California's top private schools. The most expensive private school in California is USC. The tuition there for people entering in this past school year was $72,000. And then once you factor in, this total is looking at first-year incoming students who are in on-campus housing, books, meals, expenses like that, not accounting for any financial aid here, $95,000 a year to attend USC. Similar numbers at Stanford, at Pepperdine. We have University of the Pacific at the bottom of this slide. Of the top private schools in California, that's the cheapest one, and that is still $74,000 out of pocket. A lot of these numbers have gone up between 2019 and 2024. This is a closer look from one of our stories about private school price hikes. If you look here, USC, $58,000 tuition in 2019. This past year, $72,000. On-campus housing and other expenses, $16,000, now $20,000. So these have gone up a lot. And I'm going to share, this is one of the first links I'm going to share in the chat here. There we go. And these are for the public schools in California. So the most expensive of these is Berkeley, which we can see less than half the cost of attending USC, $17,000 tuition, $42,000 total. CSU Monterey Bay, which is at the bottom here, is the cheapest of all the public schools within the UC and CSU and Cal Poly system in California because their housing is less expensive. At all the Cal State universities, annual tuition right now is around $7,000 to $8,000 a year. And those are going to be among the lowest for public schools. Similar to private colleges, tuition hikes are in effect at a lot of these schools. The California state system made a similar move in 2023. Their prices are going up by a few percent every year out of a 34% total price hike across 5 years. And at the UC school, we are in the process of a 5% annual hike. But as you saw on the previous slide, at many of these schools, the biggest expense is the housing cost. And we saw pretty consistently on these slides, that was about, let's see, yeah, mid $30,000 a year. That's what it costs to house, feed, and provide books for a student in California. But we have some good news, which is that most students do not pay full price. So 55% of UC and 60% of CSU students pay no tuition. We're going to look in a minute at Stanford specifically, but families with $75,000 or less of income pay about $4,000. And even families that make over $400,000, some students get aid, especially if you have multiple students in college. And of students who receive federal aid who are California residents, the average pays about $30,000 a year for private school and $12,000 a year for UCs and CSUs. This is a closer look at what tuition costs at Stanford and who gets aid. I'm going to pop that link back in down. I think, yeah, that's the same one. But I thought this was really interesting. If you look for families who make less than $75,000, yes, 98% get aid. But even if you look here, $250,000 to $300,000 a year, 75% of students get some aid from the school. Even families who are making more than $400,000 a year are getting an average scholarship and grant total of $12,000 a year. I wanted to touch, I know this is not a big topic for a lot of families attending this, but I wanted to touch briefly on California's community college system. California has a great community college system that was designed to make it more possible for families to afford college by sending students to community college first. A recent ranking of Bay Area community colleges and statewide community colleges found that at 38% of those community colleges in the Bay Area, a lot of students, sorry, my slide note, here we go, my slide notes were backed up. Okay, here we go. For 38% of students, their earnings are so far above the average that they're able to pay off the cost of attending that community college within a year. And the community colleges in the Bay Area actually tend to perform better than the ones in LA and the Inland Empire. And actually the top community college in California, which is Skyline College in San Bruno, is here in the Bay Area. I also wanted to briefly talk about, there are careers you can have with an associate's degree that pay more than $100,000 a year, not right out of college, but over the course of your career. If you have a student who is not inclined to a four-year university, I think those are really great programs to explore. Most students with community college tend to attend the one that is closest to where they are geographically, but I just wanted to point out some of these schools, you really want to look at the programs and what the ROI is. So at Skyline College, if you look at the total net price, students there qualify for enough aid and grants that the median student actually receives more in aid than they spend to go there. And at Canada College in Redwood City, the net cost is a median of $20 to attend. Other schools, it's more, but solid earnings at these, a great choice for the right kind of student. Like I said, one of the points of the California community college system was that so that students could transfer to a four-year university. A state audit that was released in 2024 found that of students who start community college hoping to transfer to a four-year school, only 1 in 5 get there within 4 years. It's a problem that the California college system is working on. The biggest issue was a mismatch between the courses that the community college offered and the what was on offer and what the school required from those community college students. And so we have another story, I'm going to drop this link here, that looked at transfer rates. Hi, Erica. Are people able to see the links that I'm dropping in the chat here? Jeff and Anna, are we
Yes,
seeing those?
yes, I can, yep. Yeah, this is-
Oh, you know what? Oh, I see what's happening. Zoom is limiting me to hosts and panelists. Hang on one second.
oh, yeah, we're seeing it, but nobody else.
You guys are, you know what, Jeff or Ellie, if you're on the call, could you guys put these links in the general chat for people? It's only letting me, I think because I'm presenting, it's not letting me.
Yep.
Thank you, everyone. Yes, we are going to try to get on this. Yeah, it's only letting me chat to the panelists. Jeff, do you think you can share these links with the chat?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. Sorry for the technical difficulties, people. This is the most recent one that I shared. Pardon me. Hopefully those are coming through now. So this was looking at transfer rates. This one was for Skyline College, which I pulled out in particular. It's the top one. So if you look at the transfer rate for Skyline College, 28% of students who applied to UCLA were admitted for the most recent school year they looked at. So I think, again, that's something you really want to look closely at. William is asking if we're sharing these slides afterwards. I am not sure if we're sharing these slides afterward. I know an email will go out afterward with a lot of this information on it. I'm not sure about the exact slides.
Yes, we will. Yeah, we'll include the link back to it as well.
So that's a little information about what it costs to attend college in California. And now we are going to dig into FAFSA and Cal Grants and all the ways to offset those sticker shock costs. If you have an older student, you may be aware the FAFSA has had a rocky couple of years. They rolled out the so-called Better FAFSA 2 years ago and last year, and that first year it was really delayed. There were all these technical difficulties with it. They are really hoping this year that October 1st, mark it on your calendars, that is the opening date for this next year's FAFSA aid eligibility forms. So that's the first date that you can do them. The deadline to get the FAFSA done is June 30th. But there's a priority deadline for UC and CSU schools. So if you are planning to have a student who's applying to one of those, you want to mark your calendar. For most years, it is March 2nd. That is the priority deadline for those schools. And that means you'll be considered for the full amount of aid. If you wait until after that March 2nd deadline, you're sort of fighting for the scraps of what has not already been offered to other students. So that's a big deal for California families. Cal Grants are California's grant program. That's free money that you don't have to repay. There was a question before the webinar about whether Pell Grants are still available, which are federal grants you don't repay. Yes, Pell Grant, still the same as it was before. That was not changed under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. We'll talk about the things that were, because it was a lot. The FAFSA aid package is going to differ from school to school. You are not going to get one aid package that applies to every single one of them. We're going to talk about what those aid offers are going to look like. Another thing to note for the UC, CSU, and community college system in California, there is a middle class scholarship for families with, let's see, for the incoming class for next fall, the income limit is $250,000 and the asset ceiling is $250,000. That scholarship program and a lot of other of these sort of institutional aid forms, you are going to be applying for all of those automatically when you fill out the FAFSA. Like that is automatically putting you in for all of this stuff. Which brings me to another question that we got ahead of the webinar, which was if you don't think you're going to qualify for financial aid, but you need merit aid, should you fill out the FAFSA or the CSS profile? And the answer is yes. I'm going to read you a quote directly from the UC website. They said, applying is free, that's of the FAFSA, and many students are surprised to find out what they're eligible to receive. Whether or not you think you'll qualify for need-based financial aid, it's still a good idea to apply because it's the only way to be considered for every type of aid possible. The FAFSA is something that you have to fill out every year. If your student continues to go to school, there are also often GPA requirements to continue receiving that aid. That's something that's going to be outlined in your aid package. But if you are filling out the FAFSA for next year, you are going to keep doing it every year. Starting this October, I was at the conference for student financial aid administrators a couple months ago, which was a great time, of course. And they talked about the changes to the form. People were so excited, they were raising praise hands to the ceiling. So it looks like a complicated form, but the people who do this for a living, they're like, this is so much better. We're so excited about it. So I hope you are just as excited. So here is what last year's FAFSA looked like, or 2 years ago FAFSA looked like. You can find the FAFSA at studentaid.gov, where you can make your account, you can save your progress, you can go back and forth. There is a new uploader tool where if you have your tax form open on your computer, you can just automatically drag and drop that information. And that was one of the changes that people were really, really excited about. Last year's form was 22 pages long. According to studentaid.gov, they say it takes about an hour total, 30 minutes to fill out the form and the other 30 minutes to like gather those documents. This is definitely something where you want to have an evening set aside to work on this, but it shouldn't be like a weekend long project. And you can also start it, save it, come back and finish it later. Within the FAFSA, with the online version, you can include up to 20 schools. You'll look up their codes online, and that will submit the FAFSA to those schools. And then there are ways, if you're a student is applying to more than 20 colleges, after you submit the FAFSA, to go back and resubmit it. If you choose to print it and submit it by mail, you can submit up to 10 codes. But the advice is to fill it out online. One of the questions we got ahead of time was about parents who are divorced, separated, or never married. If this is one of the changes to the FAFSA in the last couple of years, if the student's parents were never married and the student lives with one of those parents and not the other legal parent, or if the parent is widowed and not remarried, that student, the parent should only provide their own information in the parent section and skip the spouse or partner situation. I did get a lot of questions ahead of time that were really, really specific to FAFSA eligibility and minimizing your, what responsibility you'll be expected to have on here. I really can't answer a lot of those questions. If you're talking about, shielding assets, liquidating real estate, divorcing to try and sort of change what your eligibility is going to look like, those are questions for a CFP or a CPA, and I can't answer everybody's individual questions here. So I'm sorry about that. Let me see my other notes. Let's see how that aid is calculated. So FAFSA looks at what it will cost to attend the school, the COA or cost of attendance, and then it will look at your student's individual need or student aid index. And that's a pretty complicated formula that's involved with all the things that are here. That's basically determining what are your financial assets, what can you afford to contribute, what will it cost to attend the school, and then the difference between those two numbers is how they will look at how can we find the aid that meets this need. There is a free estimator tool from studentaid.gov, and I'm going to put it here where you can fill in a pretend FAFSA with all of your asset information, and it'll tell you an estimate of what you might be expecting to receive based on the cost of the colleges that you're looking at. So I would recommend everybody take a look at that tool to try to get a ballpark idea of what you would be on the hook for. The FAFSA does not factor GPA into need-based eligibility requirements, but like I said, a lot of the time there's a requirement to maintain a certain GPA to continue receiving aid. And then for other scholarships and merit aid, the GPA is factored in. Somebody had asked about the changes for farmers. There was a change to what the SAI will incorporate. They will now exclude the net worth of, and I'm reading off the government's website here, the net worth of family-owned businesses with 100 or fewer full-time or full-time equivalent employees, farms on which the family resides, and commercial fishing businesses and related expenses that are owned and controlled by a family. Again, if you're talking about one of those businesses, I think getting a CPA or a CFP involved to fill out these forms is a good idea, but just a heads up that that's a factor here. People were also asking what assets are considered when they're determining financial aid. A lot of that information is on here. Balances of current checkings and savings accounts, and the balances of accounts and the value of assets that contribute to your total net worth. So that is things like real estate, that is your investments, and yeah, businesses and farms with some changes and exceptions. It's also federal benefits have to be noted on there, and you also need the school code or address for the colleges that you are applying to the FAFSA with. Make sure I have all my notes here. Let's see. Next slide. So after you complete the FAFSA and you have submitted your applications to these colleges, pardon me. Okay, somebody asked if you have a 529 plan, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, whose assets are they, the parents or the child's? I am going to share a link to what last year's FAFSA looked like, and so you can see exactly how they word a lot of these questions. This is last year's FAFSA. This is not this year's FAFSA. If you fill out this FAFSA link that I'm going to drop here and Jeff is going to share, and you submit this to colleges, you are not going to get any financial aid, but this is to get an idea of what does the form look like and what exactly are they asking for. So the FAFSA, the colleges are not going to calculate your eligibility for aid until they determine whether they are accepting your child. So then the acceptance decision is made, then that is communicated to you and your student. Sometimes the aid offer comes with that, and sometimes it comes after. If it doesn't come with it, they'll usually tell you, here's when we start mailing it out, or here's when you can expect it. The range of when it might arrive is like anywhere from November to June. Most schools send it out March or April. It may be a tentative aid offer. And so it's possible they're saying, this is what we think we're going to be able to offer you. They're going to make that very, very clear. Normally, these aid offers are now sent electronically. They're sent via email or via a student portal. They will let you know if you should expect it to come with like a physical letter. And they'll also show you, here is the total cost to attend here. So USC, $95,000. Here's how much aid we're offering. Here's what you can expect to pay with the aid that's on offer here. It'll also list what grants and scholarships you're eligible for that come from the school itself. It'll talk about work study eligibility, which we'll speak about shortly, and it'll talk about federal loan eligibility and potentially private school loans, or private loans. These offers can be negotiated. The offer that they send you is an offer. That is not the final amount. You really need to have a compelling case to make a counteroffer. If you go back to the aid office and say, look, our income fluctuated a lot, our income has changed, one of us lost our job or something, they'll consider that. If you're going to say, our student, this is their dream program, and if we had X more money, they would be able to attend it, that's something that they'll consider. You do need a case. You can't just sort of be like, come on, like, what else you got? Like, but if you have something, if your students' merit aid eligibility has changed, which we're also going to speak about, that's another thing they'd like to hear. So don't think of this as like, okay, that's the offer and that's what we're going to get. You can talk to them, and they want your student to go there. I mean, that's why they admitted them. They want them to be there. They are going to be willing to work with you on this stuff. So beyond FAFSA, and we're going to dig into some of these topics more deeply. To my down. Let's see, merit aid for strong academics, which we're going to dig into, scholarships, also grants that come from the school and from nonprofits. Somebody asked about the CSS profile. That's something that private schools use to evaluate you for individual institutional aid. So like USC has a lot of programs that come from the school, either through alumni or through other organizations. If the school wants a CSS profile, that's something you can find out online. That's not free like the FAFSA. I think it's $25 if your income is over $100,000. But like the FAFSA, I would say definitely worth filling out. You definitely want to be considered for every type of aid that you could be eligible for. Let's see here. Okay, work study jobs are a big one. Work study is basically they're saying, we have these jobs. Typically they're on campus, not always. Sometimes they're off-campus nonprofits or public agencies. They will tell you that you are eligible for work study jobs. You are not assigned a work study job. And the thing about work study jobs is other people are eligible for them and other people will take them. If that is an avenue your student wants to pursue to pay for their living expenses while they're at school, you want to go to that listing right away that they're going to send to you and start figuring out what works for their schedule and applying for those. Let's see what else. Someone asked, is USC known for giving other aid? Yes, USC has a number of programs to offer. Private schools in general are able to offer a lot more aid because they have a lot more active alumni networks, because they are not funded the same way that UC and CSU schools are. It enables them to give a lot more aid to students. So yes, I would not say USC is known like above and beyond what any other school offers. Like we saw, Stanford has a lot of good aid as well. But in general, private schools might have more, if they rummage around in the cupboard, they might be able to find more aid for you. I'll put it that way. And then they'll talk about private and federal loans within your aid offer. So talking about merit aid, someone asked, do UCs and CSUs offer merit aid? Yes, most schools offer merit aid. At the UC system, it's the Regent Scholarship. At CSUs, it is called the CSU Trustees Award. These merit scholarships exist, but I would say it is unlikely that you will be offered a full ride based on merit. The merit aid consideration process is unique to each school. Some require you to also have filled out the FAFSA so that they can coordinate other aid or just, figure out other things. It's often based on GPA and test scores. Sometimes they also take like leadership or extracurriculars, or even they might have merit programs for people of certain ethnicities or different backgrounds or volunteer experience. So there are a lot of, every school, it's a little bit different, but all of them have some kind of program for this. At most schools, a 3.0 GPA is the minimum to be considered for merit aid programs. That's the minimum for the CSU trustee program. It's 3.25 for the UC Regents program. At a lot of other schools, it's going to be 3.5. And so the higher, the better. I would say that, this was a question we got about like, what GPA does my student need to get a full ride? I wish I could say, look, if you apply to this school at this GPA, doesn't matter what need you have, you're definitely going to get a full ride. That's just really not the way it works. It really is unique to each school. I would also say merit scholarships that come from outside the school are going to be a way to find a lot more creative funding than just the merit program that comes from the school itself. But I will say, of the California schools that I looked at with this presentation, there are none that are like, we just have a straightforward, any major, merit aid that's need blind. Somebody asked, will applying for FAFSA mean it limits your chance of admissions? That's a great question. The UC and CSU system is need blind. Whether or not you fill out the FAFSA, whether or not you need full ride to go there, the CSUs and UCs are not considering that. If you would, pardon me, I would say of the schools your child wants to apply to, you can look up whether or not they're need blind. A lot more schools are now. A lot of schools want to work with you and figure out how to make it work for the students that they want to admit, versus determining, who needs money to go there. Which UC Regents merit gives guaranteed housing? I don't have that information. I apologize. So talking about scholarships, your school's college counselor is going to be an amazing resource. They are really going to have a lot of information, and they're going to know your student individually and might know about interesting, smaller ones that your student applies for. You can also look at scholarships.com. The College Board Scholarship Search and College Confidential Scholarship Search are all really, really great resources. I was just playing around on scholarships.com today. And on all of these, you set up a profile. It's the general stuff. It's your student's name, address, age, you enter their GPA. You talk about what schools are they interested in, what majors are they interested in, what are their extracurricular activities, ethnicity, background. They also ask a lot of really specific questions because there are scholarships for everything. I saw ones that were for children of single parents, for adoptees, for LGBTQ students. Certain political interests might have scholarships affiliated, like there was one for students who are against the death penalty. There was one for environmentalists. Even unusual traits like vegetarianism, being left-handed. I saw one for duck calling, which the school year has barely started. Your child still has time to get interested in that one. There's a lot out there. And so it really makes sense to dig in and see even $500 here, $1,000 there. You never know. I also thought it was interesting. There are a lot more scholarships these days than back when I applied that don't require an essay or don't require recommendation letters. Some of those require like a short written statement. Some of them require you to like make a profile, on their site and do certain things, but not all of them are going to require a writing assignment. How do you apply for scholarships? That is an excellent question. That is going to depend on the scholarships. I would really, if you have a student who's going to be a junior or senior this year, create web profiles on these sites, start looking at those scholarships now. All of them are different. Some of them are going to be rolling admissions. Some of them are going to have specific deadlines. It's really worth saying, what is my student eligible for? What scholarships could they win? And then marking down what the process will be like. I saw on scholarships.com, they have like a dashboard where you see like, here's the scholar, you say, I'm interested in this duck calling scholarship. Okay, here's the scholarship. Here's how to apply. Here's the due date. And then it'll say like, you check off whether you applied for it or not. So they really want to help keep you organized with this stuff. I also wanted to say this was a big warning from the student aid website online. Scams are a big problem in the scholarship world. Never share your FSA ID, the ID that you use to fill out your FAFSA. Do not share that. Don't pay for processing costs or redemption costs for any scholarship. Some of them will say, oh, just enter your credit card number or your checking account to confirm eligibility. Don't do that. Legitimate companies will never guarantee or promise scholarships or grants. If you're curious, you can look it up online with the word complaint or scam and see if there are any complaints there. Also, as a general rule, don't pay anyone to apply for scholarships for you. Don't pay for anyone to find scholarships for you. You also can't pay anyone to fill out the FAFSA for you. You can have somebody help you prepare it. It cannot be a paid person. That has to be you who does it. So after you have exhausted these options, you have federal and private loans. The loans that you're eligible for from the federal government are going to be listed within your aid offer. Those have fixed rates that are set by Congress. So there are subsidized and unsubsidized federal student loans. Subsidized student loans are based on need, and unsubsidized loans are not. There were a lot of changes under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act about student loans. And so we're going to go through some of what these are. For dependent undergrad students who are taking on their own debt, the borrowing limits remain unchanged. The federal cap continues to be $27,000 over 4 academic years, which is split between subsidized and unsubsidized direct loans. The big change was to the Parent Plus loans. Under these, annual borrowing will be capped at $20,000 per year per child, with a total lifetime cap of $65,000 per student. Parents, if you have a child who is already an undergraduate, you can continue borrowing at the previous levels. This is for students starting in 2026. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act eliminated Grad Plus loans entirely, and so direct unsubsidized loans are the borrowing option for graduate students, with the pre-existing cap of it's $20,500, $50,000 for students who are in what are called professional degree programs, so like law school and med school. And then an aggregate loan limit of $100,000 for graduate students and $200,000 for professional students. So I know we went through that fast, but these were all the changes to limitations under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act, pardon me, I'm just getting over a cold. I'm gonna have some water, I apologize. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act limited what repayment options are and other relief options are. It basically set it up so that there are 3 ways to repay student loans that your student might be taking out. There's standard, which bases repayment based on the amount that the student owes and breaks those payments up over a fixed period of time. There's the Repayment Assistance Program, or RAP, which calculates based on their adjusted gross income and basically says, here's your income, you keep paying this much, and you pay it either until the loan is paid off or after 30 years of payments, it expires. And then there's the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, which is you make 120 qualified payments while working at a certified company, and then you get the rest of your loan forgiven after that, although the Trump administration has signaled they'd like to make changes to that program as well. Your child should not expect to have a lot of options for forbearance, deferment, or forgiveness in the near future. The Trump administration has made it very, very clear that they do not like that option. They do not want to continue to offer those options, and they want people to pay back the loans that they take out. When we're looking at private loans, there is no legal limit to how much private student loans you can take out. Most of the lenders will, say, we're not going to loan you more than it's going to cost to send your kid there. The 3 main types of loans that you should know about, there are co-signed loans, which is the student applies with a creditworthy borrower, which is probably you. There are non-co-signed loans, which the student would apply for on their own. And then there are parent loans, which are student loans that the parents take out and assume the obligation to repay. With the co-signed loans, those generally you get much more favorable rates than with the non-signed loans, although non-co-signed loans are more popular these days. With the co-signed loans, your student takes on the obligation to repay the debt, but if they don't, then you are on the hook for it, much like co-signing for another kind of loan. Let me see, the student aid, I'm going to drop another link for someone to send to the general chat. The federal aid, the FAFSA website has a loan simulator, and they are updating it with the OBBBA changes. And so you can keep an eye on that. But this is a great website to bookmark and say, if I take out this much money, here's how much we're going to have to pay back and what those payments will look like. In 2024, the average student loan debt in the United States was $38,375. The median was between $20,000 to $25,000. So it's definitely worth looking at a calculator and figuring out, will my student be able to repay the loans that they take out? And we're going to look at some more Chronicle stories that talk about how to know whether your student will be able to pay off their student loans. This was an interesting analysis of Georgetown University's Center on Education and Workforce study about, I'm sorry, close my window real quick. Okay, the fun of work from home. We will just give the fire truck 1 second. We're gonna give the fire truck a sec. There we go. Okay, great. So this was a look at colleges with the highest median 10-year return on investment on what it costs to attend there. So as you can imagine, going somewhere like Caltech, Stanford costs a lot of money, but the median 10-year earnings show that the return on investment is pretty significant. However, there are a ton of great public schools on this list. If you go to CSU Maritime, which is for people who become merchant marines, great ROI there. A ton of schools with great return on investment in California. We also have a story about which college majors pay the most, and this looks at individual schools and majors to say what are students making 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years after they graduate. And so this was the top chart, but I also wanted to pull here, this is earnings by campus. These are like the best paying majors. If your students like, I really want to go to Berkeley, I have no idea what I'm going to study. If they study computer science at UC Berkeley, they can expect to be earning a median of $219,000 10 years after they graduate. See, ComSci is huge here. Business at Berkeley, very, very good. But even CSU, San Jose, and yeah, San Francisco and East Bay, those nursing programs, people make a lot of money. I also pulled out, I went to UCLA, and so I'm partial to it. And so I pulled out here, your child does not have to be a computer science engineer or nurse to make good money. We see on here people who, yeah, philosophy majors from UCLA, $101,000 a year, history, $93,000 a year. And so it's a really good way to say, look, if my student is going to have to take out X amount in loans, you can see what their monthly payment is going to be. Are they going to be able to make those payments? I tried to pull my major up here. I went to UCLA for art history, which is a very small major, so small that there is not data on it, but I'm doing well. I'm happy to share that that I'm doing well. We can talk here a little bit about 529 funds. When 529 funds were first introduced, the idea was you can use this to pay tuition at trade schools and colleges. Now they've really, really expanded that. Of course, it covers a lot of other college expenses. You can use it to pay for books and housing and all that other good stuff. You can also, under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, they actually expanded how you can use them for K through 12. If your child goes to private school and has expenses there, in California, you can use up to $20,000 a year from the child's 529 to pay for that money without paying a federal penalty or taxes. I will say in California, you will still pay a state penalty and you will still pay state income tax on that money. So that is not necessarily the best use of 529 funds. But you can use them for graduate school now. You can use them under this new tax bill. You can use them for professional certifications. And so if your child wants to be a CPA or get their nursing license, 529 funds can pay for those. You can also, once your child is done with their education, roll up to $35,000 of an IRA, $35,000 of a 529 fund into an IRA. So like kickstart to their retirement earnings before they have gotten their real job yet. Somebody said ahead of time, I set up a 529 for 2 granddaughters. If one gets a full scholarship, is there an option to transfer her 529 to others? Yes. 529s allow you to roll those funds over to another recipient. It can be another child, it can be a grandchild, a niece, a nephew. It doesn't even have to be someone you're related to. So if somebody you are funding has their college set up, you can still use those for somebody else. And somebody asked, what's considered too late to open a 529 account? It's certainly never too early to open a 529 account. You can open one before your child is born. It is also never too late to start one, because the beauty of the 529 is that the growth on the money that's invested there is tax-free when it's used for these qualified expenses. And so even if you start one a year before your child starts college and it earned, let's say you put $10,000 in and it earns a 25% return, which is what the stock market did in 2024. When you pull that growth, that $2,500 growth out, you don't pay taxes on that growth. So I think it's always a good idea to fund those if and when you can. Someone asked, is there an advantage to having just one account for 2 kids or separate? I don't think there's really an advantage or disadvantage to having them all in one account or having them separate, other than keeping track of where the money is. So we're going to talk about questions to ask when you're planning to send your student to college. I think this is a really great opportunity, if you haven't already, to introduce your children to what it means to build a budget and to do financial planning. You can look at what is the net cost for each college, what is it going to cost tuition, what are we going to pay to send them there, what can we afford to contribute annually, what aid does our student qualify for, how much could they need in loans, and then talking with them about what is your major going to be, what's your career going to be, what is the average pay in that. If you have to take out loans to complete the education that you want to get, are you going to be able to pay it back and live the kind of life that you want to live? And then these are questions to talk through with your students. which I think it's great to talk to kids about what it's going to cost to send them to college, even if you're planning on footing the entire bill for them. Talk about what can my parents contribute. Yeah, I think definitely you want to get them involved in the scholarship search. That's something that they can do. And once you show them how much a $1,000 scholarship offsets in what you would pay if you took that money out in loans, they might get a little more enthusiastic about the legwork. But yeah, talking about if I take out loans, how long will it take me to pay off my loans? And what trade-offs am I willing to make to attend my dream school? Am I going to go to Berkeley but live at home? Am I going to do the 1 or 2 years at a community college first? Am I going to commit to a work-study job? These are all really good exercises for a burgeoning adult to think through. And then, yeah, will the school I want to go to or the major I want to take make it possible to pay off those loans? So, okay, we can now go to the FAQ portion of this, where I'm happy to share those links again to have them shared in the chat. And then if there are any questions that anybody has, you're welcome to ask. I'm going to scroll up through the chat and see if I missed any during the Q&A. Yeah, if you have a 529 plan, whose assets are those? Those will be spelled out by the FAFSA. At least I hope they will be. Let's see. If you rent but have an investment property, do you have to put it on the FAFSA? Probably. Again, I'm not an expert on filling out the FAFSA and how to present your assets there, but if you have assets, they go on the FAFSA. See, is there really still benefit to opening a 529 plan in your senior year? I mean, like with the example that I gave, if you have that money set aside for your child and you think it'll grow more in an investment account this year than it will sitting in a savings account this year, which typically the stock market outperforms savings accounts, then yes, because you don't pay taxes on the growth that it made. And so there's a tax benefit there. Let's see, if the student applies for FAFSA, would they have last chance of admittance? Oh yes, we touched on this topic, but yeah, the UC and CSU systems are need blind. Private school to private school, it varies whether they're need blind or not. You can look that up. Each college will make that information public. But for the UC system and for the CSU system, how much aid your child needs has absolutely no impact on whether or not they'll be admitted. I don't think there's like a list that lists all of the need blind schools, but if your child is looking at a school, if they're interested in Pitzer, Pomona, LMU, whatever, you can find that information on those websites. If a child is from divorced parents but lives full-time with only one parent, do both parents' taxes need to be added to the FAFSA? So the divorce question was one that was, with these recent changes to the FAFSA, the divorce question was addressed, which is, if the parents are divorced and the child only lives with one parent, you put the assets of the parent who contributes the most financially to the child. If both of those parents contribute equally to the child, even if the child lives with one and not the other, if the financial contribution is equal, you put the parent whose assets are greater. But again, a CPA or a CFP is going to have much better information for your individual financial situation. Somebody asked, would it be worth covering yourself with a "but the stock market can go down" sort of statement? Yes, I should have added that caveat. Ideally, you will put money in the stock market and it will grow between now and when your student goes to college. It could also go down between now and when your student goes to college. There was a question about, should I maximize 529 growth by saving that money and only using that in my student's junior and senior year? And yeah, I would say the same caveat would apply there, which is if you look at the total history of the stock market, likely it will be worth more in a few years than now, but it might not be. I would spread the 529s over the 4 years my child was at college, but that might not be the approach that you want to take. Someone's asking a question about a Roth conversion. That's a question I can't answer. That's one you definitely need to talk to a financial professional to figure that one out. I apologize.
Jessica, there are a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A too. One is applying early action or early decision important for aid purposes, specifically merit-based aid?
That's going to vary from school to school. I would say generally the earlier you apply, including early decision, the better your chances of getting that kind of aid are, because early decision shows I'm super interested, this is it, this is my dream school. And that's what colleges want. They want to admit students who are going to matriculate there. And so I think demonstrating that interest and getting ahead of the pack in terms of when they're assigning who gets what aid, probably your odds are better early decision.
Are tuition waivers considered in the net price calculation? Do you know that answer?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sorry.
Okay. How about budgeting tools? Someone's asking, are there any budgeting tools that can help with the planning and discussion process?
Oh, that's a great question. And that's another link that I wanted to share. I actually write a newsletter for the San Francisco Chronicle that is free to receive, free to sign up, where I talk about budgeting and other types of planning like that. I love helping people make budgets, and I'm a big budget proponent. I think it definitely makes sense for if you have a college student headed to college in the next couple of years, for this to be the time that you really get it. I would say, make sure you're aware of what your full financial picture is and get a handle on your inflow, outflow expenses, so that when you are making this decision with your student of exactly how much you can contribute, you really know the answer down to the nickel. Some people are asking some more questions about early decision. Again, that's going to really depend by school. My understanding is that early decision at many schools does not mean you are obligated to then pay full price, but I would look at the individual school's program to find out the answer to that. ED means you are committed to, early decision means you are committed to going there, and you might have to say, and I will accept whatever aid package you offer. But again, that's really going to depend.
Jessica, I know there's a few more questions about 529 plans. One is, at what rate, it's actually related to the FAFSA. At what rate are the student and parent assets assessed in the FAFSA?
That you're going to have to look up with the FAFSA individually. I'm not sure of the answer to that. I apologize.
Okay. Someone had a question about the CSUs, that they're noticing some are having financial trouble. Do you think they're still a safe bet?
Yes, I think they are still a safe bet. Definitely, I think every college is having financial trouble. I think these changes to the borrowing limits for students are going to impact colleges. And I think the Trump administration suing a bunch of these schools is going to impact these colleges. I think that the UC and CSU system are really a bedrock of the educational system here in California. I think if you send your child to one next fall, it will continue to exist for the time that they attend it, if that's what you're wondering. And if there are any slides that people want to go back to, I'm happy to dip around that as well.
Someone did want to see the first slide. They came on a little late. Your very first slide about the cost of the colleges.
Sure.
And for everyone else, we will provide a link back to the recording so you can have these slides and you can have the information within the presentation as well.
Okay, so this was the first slide of the presentation that I shared. This is the sticker price of attending these schools. This is not what most families pay. This is not what every family pays, but this is if you were completely out of pocket at these schools, what you would pay. These are the changes over the past few years. And then these are the costs for public colleges in California. And then I'll stop on the good news slide. This information was for the 2024-2025 school year. And so the cost to attend Stanford estimated total for a first-year incoming student with on-campus housing was $93,000 if they started this past fall. This was a look at the 2019 and 2024 tuitions at some of California's top private schools. Okay, someone says I'm wrong about the early decision question. That's definitely something I would look at the individual school you are planning to apply to and figure out what their program is, for sure.
Just, there was a question about subsidized versus unsubsidized loans.
Mhm.
If the child applies, do they qualify for the need-based loan even if the parents do not?
I believe the federal loans, it depends if your child is a dependent. So if they live with you and you claim them on your taxes, their eligibility is going to depend on your eligibility and income, not theirs.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the federal loans page. Yeah.
It's a question about, are there ways to lock in the cost of attendance from year to year?
Not to my understanding. A lot of these schools, the cost of the CSUs and UCs, we know the cost is going up, has gone up the past few years, and at many schools is set to keep going up. I don't think there's a way to say I'm locking in my tuition cost, unfortunately.
No. I think there are, I mean, there are universities around the country that I think do tuition freezes for a period of time.
Yes.
Where
Yeah, that's true.
if you qualify, if you come in that class, they'll hold that tuition steady for 4 or 5 years.
I would say to not anticipate that from the UC and CSU system, but yes, there are schools that do offer that.
Yes.
Someone's asking if the student is a green card holder and living abroad, do you need to fill in that in FAFSA? That's another question I would check with a financial professional because that's for federal student aid. And if they are not a citizen, if they're a green card holder here in the United States and living abroad currently, I don't think you would fill out the FAFSA because I don't think you would qualify for any federal aid, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Which plan should you use when opening 529 accounts? It lists other states' plans. That's another one I would talk to a financial professional about. Every state has its own. Some states allow you to open ones that are in other states that might be more advantageous. For my kids, I opened the California accounts. I kept it pretty simple.
Jessica, can you explain how the difference between the FAFSA and the CSS, and how private school like USC would look at the, do schools look at both?
Sure,
I believe not every school uses the CSS.
No, so CSS, you can look up by individual school which ones require the CSS. I was looking it up earlier while working on this. USC asks for it, Stanford asks for it. So a lot of private schools do. It's pretty common. That's basically like a FAFSA, but only applying for the aid that individual school offers. The CSS is interesting. A lot of the information it asks for is the same as what's on the FAFSA, but it also asks about, it takes into account like how many other students you have in college, but the FAFSA does too, but it looks at it in a different way. It talks about, has your family had unforeseen medical circumstances and things like that. The CSS profile allows you to give maybe a more complete picture of your financial circumstances. So I would look up whether the college wants that. And like I said, similar to the FAFSA, if the school will take a CSS profile, I would submit a CSS profile to see what you'll be considered for. Someone's asking about high academic performing students applying from out of state. A lot of the merit aid programs from UC and CSU schools are only for California residents. And so I think your student can certainly qualify for a lot more merit scholarships if you do scholarship searches. But I know the Regent program and the trustee program, to my understanding, they only want to offer those to California students. Someone's asking, does that apply to privates? If you're asking if private schools only give merit aid to in-state students, I don't think so. I think those schools anticipate people coming from in and out of state and are more holistic about who they'll consider for merit aid. But I'm not 100%. when I started looking into what merit aid programs are available, every school has a really different system for it. A lot of them have like individual merit scholarships for different majors or different, for the engineering school or for, STEM students or things like that. It's really worth, if your kid has a couple schools in mind that they are in love with, it's really worth looking up, let's say it's Stanford Merit Aid, and seeing what the school says, because each one is going to have something different.
Do you have a question here? Do scholarships from non-school sources impact the type and amount of aid a student might receive?
That's a great question. I don't believe so, but I'm not 100% sure. I think that's external, and to my understanding, that's not something you put on the FAFSA. Is it recommended to live off campus to save money? That's a great question. I think it's challenging. I think if you're talking about a freshman who's 17, 18, 19, who is in a new city for the first time. I lived on campus for only my first year at UCLA, and then I moved off campus because it was cheaper. But first year, I was really happy to be on campus and in the middle of things and around all the other first year students who were in the dorms with me. But it depends on where your student goes to school. And, we talked about making trade-offs for the school that you want to go to. Is that something your student is willing to do? Is that something you're willing to have your student do? I think that's definitely something to think about. And yeah, like I said, I was off campus second, third, and fourth year. And even paying LA rent, it was cheaper to live off campus than to live in the dorms. They are very expensive. I'm just going through my notes here to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, are there any other questions that we want to answer?
One just came in. What is scholarship displacement for those who receive outside scholarships from non-college university sources?
I saw that come in. I'm not familiar with that, so I apologize. I am not super familiar with that specific, what that is.
So I can answer that real quickly. Basically, if you win a private scholarship outside of whatever your financial aid package, then it could potentially decrease the other forms of financial aid you get, depending on where let's just say you've been awarded an A package, and then you get a $10,000 scholarship for somewhere. Technically, you would go back and apply that scholarship money towards your cost of attendance, and then that would reduce other aid accordingly.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yep. Repeat. So the question was, what is scholarship displacement for those who receive outside scholarships from non-college university sources? And the answer was that if you receive an outside scholarship from, some entity or even a scholarship sweepstakes or something like that, potentially, when you utilize that scholarship to pay down your bill, that could affect the aid that you've already been given, and reduce that aid accordingly by the amount of that scholarship. It's still good to get scholarships in any way, shape, or form, and any opportunity you have. To Jessica's point earlier, you should be out there researching scholarships, and there's so many that go unclaimed every year. And even, I think a lot of students stop looking for scholarships once they get to college. And there are a lot of scholarships for students in college that really go unclaimed because nobody's out there looking anymore. They think that once you hit the door as a freshman, then you're at where you're at. And I think we're at time too. Jessica, thank you so much for taking the time out this evening, and for really presenting us with some outstanding information. Thank you all who attended. As I mentioned before, we will provide a recording for this to all of you after this, after we depart for the evening. So look forward to that. And I thank you again, Jessica. I don't know if you have any words of wisdom or parting words.
Pardon me. Yeah, save is my advice. But thank you so much, everybody. I'm so happy to have you here and so happy to share information from College Confidential and what we've been covering at the San Francisco Chronicle. I started at the Chronicle just a year ago. I came over from the LA Times, and it is really interesting to see how much the Chronicle is focused on this college admissions data, this college ROI data. I spent close to a decade at the LA Times and never learned a lot of the stuff that I'm learning here, even as a UC grad. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it with all of you, and best of luck with your college admissions journey.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.